1953. A kitchen in Baltimore. Coins clicking on oilcloth, coffee on cast iron. A woman folds 5 bills into a napkin that will bury her dead and keep the lights on, and no bank would touch her. What she knew was erased, so an industry could sell it back. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how black families survived and why you were never told. Mid-century black America did not have institutions. It did not have credit lines or government programs or safety nets with their name on them. It had something else, and that something has been quietly dismantled over the last 60 years. This video opens with something that has never been covered on this channel before. A deep look at the Su-Su Circle, the rotating savings system black women ran from their kitchen tables that put down payments on houses, buried the dead, and kept families whole when every financial door in America was shut. That section comes first because it changes how you see everything that follows. And what follows is a collection of the most powerful survival knowledge this channel has ever assembled. We begin with the vanished porching traditions that held black neighborhoods together. Then comes the centerpiece, the one that changed more of you than any other video on this channel. The forgotten rent party rules from 1920s Harlem. The survival ritual where music and fried fish and a room full of neighbors were the only thing standing between a family and the sidewalk. That video proved something the modern world does not want proven. That community was never a feeling. It was a financial instrument. And millions of you watched it and remembered what your families already knew. After that, we move into how black grandmothers fed 20 people on almost nothing. Then the Green Book travel rules that kept families safe on roads that were not safe. And we close with the mother wit remedies every black grandmother swore by that actually worked. Every one of these cost nothing. Every one of them worked. And not one required permission from a single soul. The Su-Su Circle came to America through West Africa and the Caribbean. By the 1920s, it lived in kitchens from Harlem to Houston. A small group of women each put in the same amount weekly. $2, $5. One woman took the full pot home. Next week, it went to another. No bank, no interest, no paperwork, just trust. A 1963 Federal Reserve survey found fewer than 1 in 4 black families held a bank account. The financial industry called these circles primitive and unreliable to push black families into high-fee accounts and predatory lending. That was not a failure of community. That was a business decision. And the Su-Su Circle was only the beginning of a system that went far deeper than money. A porch in Memphis, Tennessee. Summer evening, 1951. The wood is warm under bare feet, and the smell of honeysuckle sits heavy in the air. A woman fans herself with a church program while 2 neighbors pull chairs closer to the railing. Across the street, a man waters a patch of grass no bigger than a kitchen table. Nobody on this block owns much of anything. But everybody on this block knows who is sick, who is short on rent, who just lost a husband, and whose child needs shoes by Monday. They do not have apps. They do not have social workers. They do not have community boards with mission statements printed on cardstock. They have proximity. They have supper plates carried across driveways. They have a grandmother on every corner who sees everything and forgets nothing. These families moved through the 1940s and 50s and 60s inside a web of mutual protection that no product and no program has ever been able to replace. What you are about to see is not a list of memories. It is a discipline. A complete architecture of survival that once lived in every black neighborhood in America and was removed piece by piece and replaced with services that cost more and do less and answer to someone who has never set foot on your block. Number 20. The women who watched the block. In every black neighborhood, there was at least one woman who sat on her porch all day and knew everything that happened on that street. She was the surveillance system, the alert network, the conscience. A metal lawn chair with green and white webbing, a glass of sweet tea with the ice long melted, a cardboard funeral home fan moving slow. That woman could tell you who came home late, whose child was acting up, which car was parked where it should not have been. She knew the mailman's schedule by heart. A stranger felt her gaze before he saw her face. She did not call the police. She was the police. Today, a Pew Research study found that a majority of Americans know only some or none of their neighbors by name. That woman knew everyone for 4 blocks. She required no salary, no badge, no database. Just a porch and the authority of having raised everyone on the block. Nobody hired her, nobody replaced her. She watched the street. But what she did while she watched is its own story. And it starts with a colander full of green beans and a brown paper bag. Number 19. Shelling peas and snapping beans on the porch. Women brought the colander, the grocery sack, and the bushel to the porch every summer. Purple hull peas came from the garden or from the produce truck. A 5-gallon bucket sat between the knees. The pop of the hull as the thumb ran along the seam. The soft patter of peas hitting the metal bowl. Green beans snapped into inch-long pieces. Children were pulled into the work whether they volunteered or not. A pot of water was already boiling in the kitchen. Newspaper was spread on the porch floor to catch the shells. Every pea was a conversation. 3 women could shell a bushel and solve every problem in the family in 2 hours. The food was the excuse. The communion was the point. But those women were sitting on something more powerful than a porch. They were sitting on an architectural idea that was old before America existed. Number 18. The shotgun house porch, an African invention. Many scholars believe the front porch, as Americans know, it did not come from Europe. It may have come from Africa. The shotgun house, that narrow home 1 room wide and up to 3 rooms deep, may trace its origins to West Africa through Haiti. Some scholars believe the word shotgun comes from the West African term to gun, meaning place of assembly. Not a place to sit, a place to gather. Rows of these homes appeared in New Orleans, Memphis, Houston, and Birmingham. Each porch was 6 feet from the next, close as theater seats. That closeness was not poverty. It was design. They bulldozed entire blocks of shotgun houses and called it urban renewal. Cities demolished them by the thousands, destroying the architecture and the culture it held in the same swing. But the women who sat on those porches had a tool in their hand that said more about black survival than any textbook: a cardboard fan. 3 cents worth of paper carrying more weight than you would think possible. Number 17. The funeral home cardboard fan. Every black porch in America had at least one cardboard paddle fan from the local funeral home. A wooden handle stapled to stiff cardboard. A picture of Jesus or Martin Luther King Jr. on one side. The funeral home name and phone number on the other. The fan came free from Sunday service or from the visitation. The cardboard was thick enough to push real air. The wooden handle worn smooth where the thumb gripped it. Women fanned slow on the porch, a rhythm like a resting heartbeat. The fan doubled as a fly swatter, as a plate for a slice of pound cake, as a signal to a child across the yard. One sharp wave meant, "Come here right now." A dead man's name on the back of a fan keeping a living woman cool on a July porch. That is not morbid. That is a community small enough that dying and living happened on the same block, in the same week, under the same hand. And while she fanned with one hand, the other was often holding a pressing comb that had been sitting on the stove since noon. Number 16. The porch hair session. Mothers, grandmothers, and aunties did hair on the front porch on Saturday. Press and curl, cornrows, plaits for the week. A pressing comb laid across the eye of a gas burner, the blue flame underneath. Dixie Peach pomade at 35 cents a tin. Royal Crown hairdressing in the glass jar. The sizzle when hot metal met greased hair. That smell was the universal Saturday smell of every black neighborhood in America. A towel across the shoulders, a girl told to hold still. If she flinched, the comb kissed her ear and she remembered the lesson. The salon charged money. The porch charged patience. The difference is that the porch came with a grandmother's hands. And the quiet knowledge that beauty was not purchased. It was given by someone who loved you enough to sit in the heat and hold your head straight. Something to notice about these first 5. Not one required a building permit, a business license, or an invitation. The porch was public and private at the same time. It belonged to the family, but it served the block. There is no modern equivalent. Nearly 3 out of 4 American adults use social media regularly. It is not the same. Number 15. Sleeping on the porch. Before air conditioning was affordable, entire families slept on the porch during the hottest months. Pallets on the floor. A cot, sometimes just a quilt folded double. A sheet hung for modesty, and a window fan on the sill pointing outward. A mosquito coil burned in a tin can on the railing. Children stacked side by side on quilts. The strange magic of falling asleep outside while the whole street did the same. You could hear Mr. Thompson's radio 3 houses down playing WDIA until the station signed off. The house was too hot to hold a family. The porch was not. Every family on the block solved the same problem the same way. And in solving it together, they built something no air conditioning unit ever replaced. And while they were out there in the evening air, somebody had already dragged the card table out. Because no porch was complete without what came next. The porch was where men played dominoes every evening and all day Saturday. The sound could be heard 2 blocks away. A folding card table with metal legs wobbled on uneven boards. A cigar box full of double 6 dominoes. The slow, certain way a man placed his tile. And then the slam. Palm flat, driving the domino into the table hard enough to bounce the other man's beer. Talking trash the entire time. Scoring done on a brown paper bag with a pencil stub. A 25-cent bet that mattered more than money. The domino table was the only boardroom most of those men were ever invited to. It was enough. They had house rules and they enforced them with a look. Number 13. Selling plates from the front porch. If a child could not afford school supplies or the church needed new choir robes, black folks hosted plate sales. A hand-lettered cardboard sign taped to the porch post. Plates, $3. Fish, $4. The smell of hot grease carried 2 houses in every direction. Catfish, fried chicken, spaghetti on Wednesdays. White bread on the side, always. The line formed at 5 in the evening on a Friday. Cash only. Georgia Gilmore understood this when she sold fried chicken sandwiches to finance the Montgomery bus boycott, starting in 1955. Selling plates was not a side hustle. It was an economic engine. No permits, no inspections, just a woman who could cook and a porch within walking distance of hungry people. She could feed 30 people from that porch. But the porch also handled justice, and sometimes justice was not gentle. Number 12. The porch whipping. When a child misbehaved badly enough, the whipping did not happen inside the house. It happened on the front porch where the neighborhood could see. A switch pulled from the hedge, the child's legs danced involuntarily. Neighbors watched without pretending not to watch. The humiliation was more lasting than the sting. Everybody knew by sundown, not because of gossip, but because 3 porches heard every word. The porch whipping was a contract. The neighborhood raised that child, and the neighborhood witnessed the correction. Discipline was communal because survival was communal. A child who ran wild was not just a family problem, he was a block problem. The porch held everyone accountable. Number 11. The porch quilting circle. Women brought their quilting frames onto the porch and sewed together. Sometimes 4 or 5 women gathered around a single frame stretched between chairs. The quilt top had already been pieced together inside during winter, and now it was stretched for hand quilting in the good light of the porch. Old dresses, old shirts, old curtains were cut into squares. A woman could point to a patch and say, "That was your daddy's church shirt. That was the dress your Aunt Lucille wore to the reunion in 1958. Every quilt was a family history stitched into cloth. When the last stitch was tied, the quilt held the voices of every woman who sat there making it. Every one of these traditions had something in common. They required a person to be visible, present, reachable. You could not do any of this behind a closed door or a privacy fence. Today, many new American homes are designed around backyard decks instead of front porches. That shift tells you everything. Number 10. The Candy Lady's Porch. Every black neighborhood had a candy lady. One woman on the block who sold candy, chips, freeze cups, and pickles from her front porch. Every child knew her address by heart. Now and later's 2 for a nickel. Kool-Aid frozen in Dixie cups, a dime. Pickles in a Ziploc bag with Kool-Aid powder shaken on top, a quarter. A cigar box for the money. She knew your name and your mama's name. If you were short on change, you asked carefully. You were not just buying snacks. You were asking a neighbor to extend trust. In a neighborhood where kids were asked to grow up quickly, her porch was one of the few places where childhood was permitted. One candy lady in Orange Mound in Memphis said this has been going on for over 70 years. 70 years of children lining up at the same porch. But not all porch visits involved nickels and candy. Some involved a young man in a pressed shirt, sitting very straight and trying not to sweat. Number 9. The courting porch. A young man who was interested in a girl had to sit with her on her family's front porch, in full view of her parents, her siblings, and every neighbor within earshot. Privacy was not an option. That was the design. He sat in the chair farthest from the girl and closest to the front door, her father visible through the screen door, her mother bringing out lemonade not for hospitality, but to get a closer look. The porch swing moved slowly if things were going well. If the father came outside and sat down, the visit was over. A boy who showed up after dark was not invited back. Courtship on the porch had rules because it had witnesses. A man's intentions were tested in daylight. Number 8. The Saturday night porch party. On Saturday nights in warm months, certain porches became the gathering spot. An extension cord powered a record player or a transistor radio, WLAC out of Nashville, WDIA in Memphis. Bobby Blue Bland spun on the turntable. A bucket of ice held bottles of Falstaff beer. Folding chairs were pushed back against the railing. A woman's shoes were left by the screen door because she could not dance in them on porch boards. Laughter was sharp enough to carry 4 houses down. The Saturday night porch party required no cover charge, no dress code. It needed one good radio and people who still knew how to gather without an invitation. Number 7. The Sunday Morning Porch Hymn. On Sunday mornings before church, families sat on the porch in their Sunday clothes and somebody started humming, then singing. Hymns carried from porch to porch until the whole block sounded like a choir warming up. White gloves on the railing, a Bible on the arm of the chair, patent leather shoes catching the morning light. Amazing Grace starting low on one porch and answered 3 doors down with the harmony. The block had no choir director. It did not need one. Church began on the porch an hour before anyone opened a church door. The steeple was just where they finished what the porch had already started. But there was one porch tradition that most people have never thought to name, and it was the foundation underneath every other tradition on this list. Number 6. The Elder's Chair. On every porch there was one specific chair that belonged to the oldest living person in the household. No one else sat in it, ever. A green metal glider with a cushion flattened to the exact shape of one body, or a wooden rocker with the right armrest worn smoother than the left, or a lawn chair that had been rewebbed 3 times. That chair faced the street at the best angle. It caught the breeze first. When Big Mama sat down, the conversation adjusted. Voices dropped. Lies stopped. Children straightened up without being told. When she died, nobody sat in that chair for a long time. Some families never moved it. It stayed on the porch through one more summer. Empty, holding the shape of a woman who was no longer there to fill it. That is not furniture. That is a monument. Sociologists call what these porches created the third place, a space that is neither home nor work, where a community happens naturally. Black people did not need a sociologist to name it. They called it the porch. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic. No institution in modern life does the work of one front porch in a black neighborhood in 1957. Number 5. The Porch Watermelon. On the hottest days, someone brought a watermelon that had been cooling in the bathtub or in a wash tub full of ice. They thumped it first, the deep hollow sound that meant it was ready. It was cut lengthwise with a butcher knife on newspaper spread across the porch steps. There was the crack of the rind as it split. Seeds spat into the yard. Juice ran down chins and forearms. Children ate the heart first and left the rest for the grown folks. A salt shaker was passed around because some people put salt on their watermelon, and some people thought those folks were out of their minds. Nobody photographed it. Nobody posted it. It was just food shared in the heat among people who did not need an occasion to gather. Number 4. The Porch Radio. Before every house had its own television, one radio on one porch could serve an entire block. A Zenith or a Philco with an extension cord running through the screen door. Joe Louis fighting on a Friday night, and every porch going silent at the same time. Jackie Robinson at bats called out loud enough to follow from the sidewalk. Saturday evenings, the blues filling the space between houses like smoke. Sunday morning, the gospel hour. The radio did not separate the neighborhood, it unified the block. One signal heard from 12 porches. That radio cost $9 at the Western Auto. The community it built was worth more than the house it sat in front of. Number 3, the lying porch. Elders told stories on the porch. Long ones. Some were true, some were improved. An old man sat in a chair he had not left in 2 hours. His audience was his grandchildren, his neighbors, and a stray dog lying under the step. He told stories about the flood of 1927, about what the white man said at the store, and about what your grandfather said back. The children did not interrupt. The story had a rhythm, a slow beginning, a long middle, and a sudden punchline. Some stories were so old they had been told by 3 different men in 3 different decades. Nobody knew the original version anymore. What mattered was that someone was still telling it. It was where a child learned who her people were and what they had survived. That history lived in a voice on a porch after supper. When the last person who remembered the story died with them. No archive on earth recorded its loss. Number 2. The repast porch. After a funeral, the family came home, and the neighborhood came to the porch. Food arrived in foil-covered dishes. People sat for hours. The porch overflowed with people still in black. A card table was covered with fried chicken, baked macaroni, collard greens, potato salad, sweet potato pie, and pound cake. Children ran in the yard, confused by the gravity of the adults. You could hear someone laughing at a memory, then catching themselves, then laughing again. Somebody saying he would have hated all this fuss. Somebody else saying that is exactly why we are doing it. The repast porch said something no funeral home could. It said we are still here. The dead had been buried, but the living still needed to eat and cry and laugh within reach of each other. The porch held all of that at once without breaking. But if you strip away every tradition on this list, the hair, the dominoes, the plates, the hymns, the funerals, there is one thing underneath them all. The simplest tradition we counted, the one they killed first, and the one that mattered most. Number 1. The evening sit. Every evening after supper, black families went outside and sat on the porch. That is all. They sat, they watched, they existed in the open air together, for no reason other than that the day was ending and they were alive to see it. The screen door closing behind you with that particular spring-loaded slap, the creak of the chair accepting your weight, the day still warm in the porch boards under bare feet, lightning bugs rising out of the grass. The streetlight coming on at the end of the block, a mother calling a name into the dark, a neighbor lifting a hand from the next porch. The wave returned, no words needed, the sky going from orange to purple to black. Nobody going inside until it was fully dark, because inside meant the day was over, and nobody wanted it to be over just yet. The evening sit cost nothing. It required nothing. It produced nothing that could be measured or sold or optimized. It was a family on a porch at the end of a day. That is all it was. And it was everything. 20 traditions. Not one required a membership, a password, or a monthly subscription. They required a porch, a chair, and the willingness to be seen by your neighbors. Somewhere right now, on a porch that still has a metal glider and a screen door that slaps, an old woman is lifting her hand to wave at someone walking by. Somewhere, a child is watching. The lesson is beginning again. But the porch was only one room in a much larger house of survival. When the rent came due and the money was not there, these families did not call a hotline or fill out an application. They threw open the front door and turned desperation into something no one has been able to replicate since. A neighbor's crisis became the whole block's problem to solve, and nobody ever kept a ledger of who owed whom. Number 20. The 25-cent door. A quarter at the door could cover a family's rent. Neighbors paid admission so strangers would not lose their home. Hosts charged 25 cents at the apartment door. They rolled back the carpet, dimmed the lights, and seated the musician. A quarter pressed into a woman's palm at the doorframe. A cigar box on the hall table filled with nickels and dimes. That admission, combined with plates of food and glasses of bootleg gin, could generate $50 to $100 in a single night. More than enough for the month's rent. 25 cents in 1926 is roughly $4.50 today. That is what it cost to save a family. The door was not a transaction. It was a covenant. You walked in, you paid, and you kept a stranger in their home one more month. Number 19. The rent party ticket. Bright-colored tickets disguised as social invitations quietly funded rent payments across Harlem apartments during the housing crisis. Hosts printed small, bright-colored cards with quirky rhymes and code words. The cards never once called it a rent party. They enlisted a man known as the Wayside Printer, a middle-aged white man who walked Harlem streets with a portable press on a cart. Small cards, pink, blue, yellow, the size of a playing card. The wording always used terms like social party, parlor social, or too terrible party. Never rent party. The poet Langston Hughes collected these tickets for decades. Those cards now sit in the Yale Benecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library under glass. A woman who could not write her own name paid a man with a portable press to print poetry so her family could keep a roof. Number 18. The Lone Piano Man. One pianist played loud enough for crowded apartments, creating Harlem Stride because families could not afford full jazz bands. Stride piano emerged because families could only afford to hire one musician. One man had to sound like a full band. The left hand performed rhythmic chords while the right hand played blues melodies and riffs so fast the keys blurred. The style was called Harlem Stride, made famous by James P. Johnson, Fats Waller, and Willie the Lion Smith. One man, one upright piano. 60 bodies in a room the size of a modern studio apartment. No amplifier, no microphone. Just a man making a piano sound like a 5-piece band because the host could only pay for one. Some of these men played 3 or 4 parties in a single night, walking block to block with aching hands and a pocket full of dollar bills. A style of music that changed the world was born because a family was too broke to hire a band. Number 17. The furniture clearance. Families emptied entire apartments every weekend, transforming cramped living rooms into dance halls to survive another month financially. Every piece of furniture was pulled out of the front rooms, rugs rolled up, colored bulbs fitted into the sockets, beds pushed into the back hallway, dressers stacked in the bedroom, a kitchen table turned on its side, the bare floor swept clean. Hosts sometimes rented folding chairs from a local undertaker, chairs borrowed from the man who buried the dead. That detail alone tells you how thin the line was. A family disassembled its home every Saturday night so it could afford to keep it. That is not a party. That is an act of will. Number 16. The kitchen table economy. Women sold Southern food from tiny kitchens, turning fried chicken and collard greens into emergency rent money overnight. Hosts cooked massive quantities of Southern food and sold it by the plate, 10 cents, 15 cents, a quarter if there was ham. Hoppin' John, fried chicken, chitterlings, collard greens, potato salad, sweet potato pone. A woman frying chicken in a cast iron skillet in a kitchen the size of a closet. Pig's feet simmering since Thursday. Cornbread still warm when it hit the plate. For people 600 miles north of the place they were born, a plate of chitlins in a Harlem kitchen was the closest thing to the life they had left behind. She fed 100 strangers out of a kitchen with one burner and a sink that dripped. She was not running a restaurant. She was running a rescue operation that smelled like Sunday dinner. 5 rules in. Not one required a license, a permit, or a loan. A quarter at the door. Tickets from a portable press. A piano man who played until his fingers ached. A kitchen that became a restaurant. The entire economy fit between the front door and the fire escape. Number 15. The bootleg bar. Bathtub gin and homemade whiskey funded apartments throughout Prohibition, with mason jars replacing licensed bars across Harlem nights. A quarter pint called a shorty went for a dime. Prohibition was the law of the land, and homemade liquor was offered in open defiance. The corn whiskey was called King Kong because it knocked you sideways. A full pint cost 50 cents. No one checked identification. No one asked your name. The apartment was the speakeasy. The host was the bartender, and if a cop came knocking, there was always a back window and a fire escape. They were already living outside the protection of the law by the simple fact of existing. Selling corn whiskey in a mason jar was the least of it. Number 14. The Saturday Night Rule. Saturday parties matched factory paydays, giving workers exactly one weekend night to raise rent before Monday morning arrived. Parties were held on Saturdays. That was payday for most laborers. The music started at 10 and lasted until dawn. A man walked home from the rail yard or the loading dock with a small envelope in his front pocket. Wages in cash. He had walked past the landlord's payment box that morning. He knew what was owed. Saturday night was the only window. By the time the sun came up over Lenox Avenue, the cigar box held enough to survive the first. The money came in on Saturday. The rent was due on Monday. The party was the bridge between those 2 days. There was no margin for error and no second chance if the night fell short. Number 13. The Thursday Night Party. Domestic workers hosted Thursday gatherings because it was often their only free evening after exhausting household labor shifts. Although rent parties happened every night of the week, Thursday was especially popular among domestic workers across Harlem. Black women who cooked, cleaned, and raised other people's children 6 days a week in white households on Park Avenue. Thursday was their one night. They came home to Harlem. They came home to the music. Many of them were the very ones organizing the parties. For these women, hosting was a form of entrepreneurship that gave them not just rent money, but independence and standing in the community. She spent the week invisible in someone else's house. Thursday night, she danced in her own. Number 12. The Home Defense Officer. Large men guarded apartment entrances, protecting guests from thieves, gamblers, and police interference throughout crowded rent party nights. Some hosts hired what they called a home defense officer to watch the door and break up trouble immediately. Not a bouncer. A home defense officer was a large man stationed at the apartment entrance. He knew who belonged and who did not. He could spot a pickpocket by the way the man moved through a crowd. They were professional gamblers, confidence men, and crooks looking for an accomplice. The home defense officer kept them out or put them down. The community policed itself because nobody else was going to. He was the law inside that apartment. Outside the door, there was no law that protected them. Number 11. The colored light bulb in the window. Colored bulbs silently advertised underground parties, guiding neighbors upstairs without alerting outsiders or suspicious authorities watching nearby streets. A red, blue, or pink light bulb screwed into a window socket signaled a rent party happening upstairs. You walked down Lenox Avenue on a Saturday night and you looked up. An apartment with a colored light in the window and the sound of piano music would draw you in off the street. You did not always need the ticket. The light told you. If you did not know the signal, you were not invited. The light was visible from the sidewalk, but invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. An entire communication system built from a 5-cent light bulb and a silent agreement that nobody would explain it to outsiders. 10 rules. A full economy running on nothing but ingenuity. A door charge, a kitchen, a bar, a musician, a bouncer, a signal system, a printing network, a schedule calibrated to pay cycles. All of it organized by people who had been told they were not organized. Harlem built a parallel world inside its own apartments. Number 10. The Cutting Contest. Jazz legends battled piano to piano inside crowded apartments, building reputations through musical competition before roaring neighborhood audiences overnight. Rent parties became the stage for cutting contests where pianists competed by trying to outplay one another in public. Fats Waller, James P. Johnson, and Willie the Lion Smith regularly made the rounds. One man played until the crowd roared. Then another man sat down and tried to play something better. The crowd decided who won. No judges, no trophy, just the room. If you won, you played the next party. If you lost, you sat down and listened. Reputations were built and destroyed between midnight and dawn. The greatest jazz musicians in American history auditioned for their careers in someone's living room. The audience was neighbors trying to make rent. Number 9. The dance floor that changed American dance. Crowded apartments forced creative movement styles that later evolved into swing dancing and the famous Lindy Hop nationwide. Many jazz-era social dances began inside crowded rent party apartments where improvisation replaced formal ballroom movement entirely. Formal dancing was impossible, not enough room. So they invented something that fit: quick feet, close bodies, a swing of the hip in 2 square feet of bare floor. These were dances born from compression, not choreography. The movements were later refined in the great dance halls of Harlem. The Savoy Ballroom, which opened in 1926, became the birthplace of the Lindy Hop. But the raw energy that fed the Savoy's dance floor came from the same community that packed those Saturday night apartments. The culture moved from the living room to the ballroom, and from there it conquered the world. Number 8. The vocabulary of the drink. Bootleg liquor developed its own slang, prices, and rituals, forming a hidden language around survival and celebration together. The bootleg liquor served at rent parties had its own names, prices, measurements, and underground social customs. A shorty warmed your chest without draining your paycheck. King Kong whiskey could knock a man sideways instantly. Some gin tasted smooth enough to become dangerous quickly. Other bottles burned like kerosene from the first sip. Families traded gin recipes like treasured Southern cooking traditions. Lemon peel, juniper berries, sugar, and desperation mixed together in hidden kitchens throughout Harlem apartment blocks. The mason jar became both a drinking glass and a survival tool at the exact same time. Guests learned quickly which apartments sold safe liquor and which ones sent people stumbling into the street. Every dime spent at the bar traveled directly towards somebody's rent envelope waiting on the kitchen table. The liquor was illegal, but eviction frightened people far more than the police ever could. They built a full vocabulary around the act of surviving. That is what a culture does when it has no institutions to speak for it. It makes its own language. Number 7. The 12-party block. Entire apartment blocks hosted simultaneous parties, competing through better musicians, stronger drinks, and hotter Southern food plates each night. As many as 12 rent parties on one Harlem block could happen simultaneously on busy Saturday evenings. Music spilled from windows across entire Harlem blocks nightly. Multiple piano players competed through thin apartment walls at the same time. Different buildings became famous for whiskey, fish, or cornbread. Bright-colored bulbs attracted guests walking below on Lenox Avenue. Children lying awake in nearby apartments memorized the sound of stride piano before they could even read properly. The parties transformed ordinary apartment blocks into whole nighttime economies running without permits or outside investment. Competition pushed hosts to improve everything from the musicians to the quality of the potato salad plates. By dawn, the sidewalks were crowded with exhausted workers laughing their way home as the city slowly woke up. For one night every week, Harlem turned survival into an industry powered entirely by its own people. When people call the rent party a party, they misunderstand what they are describing. It was an industry. Number 6. The court that could not stop it. A New York court refused to shut parties down, proving Harlem's underground housing economy had become impossible to eliminate. A woman complained about the noise from a rent party below her apartment and lost the court case. Not the host, the complainant. A court of law in New York looked at this situation and decided the party was going to win. The judge did not shut it down. He told the woman downstairs to find another apartment. There is something here that goes past economics. These people did not just throw parties. They built a civilization inside their own walls. They had infrastructure, they had culture, they had art forms that did not exist before they existed. No grant, no government program, no permission from anyone. Just the rent, the first of the month, and the decision to face it together. Today in America, the average renter spends 30% of gross income on housing. In cities like New York, that number can push past 50%. The housing crisis is not new. Harlem faced it 100 years ago. The difference is that Harlem answered it with a 25-cent door and a cast-iron skillet. Number 5. The card table in the back room. Backroom card games generated additional rent money, where trust and strategy mattered more than luck or gambling itself. Many rent parties included folding card tables where guests played bid whist while the house collected small percentages. 4 chairs, a deck of worn bicycle playing cards, a nickel ante, sometimes a dime. Partners sat across from each other, the slap of a trump card on bare wood. Smoke drifting above the lamp. The house skimmed a small percentage from each pot. More money for the rent box. Some nights, the back room brought in almost as much as the front door. In the back room, where the music was lower and the smoke was thicker, men and women played a game that required trust and a partner who could read your eyes without a word. That is not gambling. That is relationship. Number 4. Southern food as Northern currency. Southern recipes carried north during migration, becoming emotional lifelines and economic tools for homesick Harlem residents struggling financially. The food served at rent parties came directly from Southern traditions carried north during the Great Migration period. The rent party tradition itself was rooted in customs from black communities down south. Saturday night fish fries, parlor socials, and church suppers supplied dishes like fried catfish, collard greens cooked in fatback, and sweet potato pone. Recipes came from Georgia, the Carolinas, and Alabama. No measurements were written down, just a handful of this and a pinch of that. Those plates were sold for 10 cents each, 700 miles from the place where the recipe was first learned. A plate of food at a rent party was never just a plate of food. It was proof that where you came from still mattered. It was memory you could hold in your hands. Number 3. The landlord who never knew. Landlords collected rent without understanding that entire neighborhoods secretly financed apartments through parties, food, music, and underground cash economies. The entire rent party system operated in an invisible way, while landlords unknowingly accepted money raised through underground community networks. That 25-cent admission, combined with food and liquor profits, created a circular cash economy that kept every dollar flowing within the community. The landlord sent a collector on Monday morning. The tenant opened the door, counted out the bills, and closed it again. The invisible economy of Harlem was a closed loop. The money came from 40 neighbors on Saturday night. It left through one man's hand on Monday morning. And the man who took it never once understood the machinery that produced it. Number 2. The poet at the party. Langston Hughes preserved rent party invitations because Harlem's crowded apartments inspired more truth than elite literary circles ever could. He kept those little printed cards even as he traveled through the Soviet Union, Haiti, and Japan. And he carried them until he finally settled into his own home on East 127th Street in 1947. He was a poet in the corner of someone's apartment at 2 in the morning, not performing, but listening. The greatest poet of the Harlem Renaissance found his material not in a lecture hall, but in a living room with a plate of fish and a glass of King Kong in his hand. The party did not need the poet, but the poet needed the party. Every one of these rules came from the same place: necessity, not inspiration. The need to make rent by Monday with whatever came in on Saturday, in a city that charged them double for half the space. They did not romanticize what they were doing. They survived it. Number 1. The unwritten rule. If a neighbor faced eviction, the entire block organized a party because survival depended on protecting each other collectively. The deepest rule of the rent party was simple. If your neighbor could not pay rent, everyone helped. Duke Ellington recalled that rent parties grew out of parlor socials and church suppers held to raise funds for church needs. Before Harlem, it was the church supper in the rural South. A family in trouble. A collection passed. No paperwork, no application. Just a knock on the door and $1 folded inside a hymnal. In Harlem, the church supper became the rent party. The principle never changed. You do not let your neighbor lose their home. You clear the furniture. You borrow chairs from the undertaker. You screw in the red light bulb. You fry the fish. You open the door at 10 o'clock on Saturday night. And by morning, the rent is paid, not yours, theirs. 20 rules. Not one required a bank, a permit, or anyone's approval. Just a piano, a skillet, a red light bulb, and neighbors refusing to let each other fall. 100 years later, the buildings have changed, but the math has not. And somewhere right now, in a city where the rent is still too high and the wages are still too low, someone is knocking on a neighbor's door, not to borrow something, to offer it. Every one of those rent parties carried a quiet message. Survival was not suffered alone. It was shared. And sharing it meant knowing how to stretch what little you had until it fed every mouth that needed feeding. That same instinct walked straight from the rent party into the kitchen, where nothing was ever wasted and no one ever left hungry. Number 20. The one chicken that fed 12. She bought one whole fryer and got 3 full meals from it. Nothing was left at the end but a clean wishbone drying on the windowsill. One fryer at 39 cents a pound from the A&P in 1961. First night, she fried the pieces in Crisco, in the cast iron. Legs, thighs, wings, the back broken into 2 sections with her hands. The second meal was the breast meat pulled and mixed with celery and Duke's mayonnaise for chicken salad. The third meal was the carcass dropped into a pot of water with salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. She boiled it for 4 hours. That became the stock for dumplings or rice soup. The neck and gizzards went into the gravy or were handed to the children as snacks while she worked. 1 chicken, 12 people, 3 days. She did not call it meal planning. She called it Tuesday. Number 19. The bacon grease can by the stove. Every drop of rendered fat was saved in a tin can on the back of the stove. It was her primary cooking oil. It cost her nothing. Often it was a Maxwell House coffee can or an old Crisco tin. Every morning, the bacon grease was poured through a small strainer to catch the bits. It was used for frying eggs, seasoning greens, greasing the cornbread skillet, and starting the gravy. 1 pound of bacon at 49 cents rendered enough cooking fat for 2 weeks. The can sat near the back burner, always warm, always liquid. She never once bought a bottle of cooking oil in her life. The idea of pouring fat down the drain would have made her sit down. Number 18. Hot water cornbread. Cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt, a pinch of sugar, shaped by hand and fried in a skillet. No oven, no eggs, no milk, no recipe. Quaker yellow cornmeal cost 10 cents a pound. Boiling water was poured in until it held together when squeezed in the palm. Shaped into oval patties with wet hands. Fried until the edges turned copper brown and the center stayed soft. The total cost to feed 8 people was 3 cents worth of cornmeal and a spoonful from the can. No recipe card, no measuring cup. She knew it was right by how it felt in her palm. Number 17. The big pot of beans. A 1-pound bag of dried beans soaked overnight and cooked all day with a ham hock, fed 10 people for 2 days straight. Great Northern, Pinto, and Navy beans. 15 cents a pound, soaked overnight and swelling to twice their size by morning. 1 smoked ham hock at 10 cents. Seasoned with salt, black pepper, a bay leaf, and a dried red pepper. Cooked low and slow until the broth turned thick and creamy on its own. Served over rice or with cornbread to soak the pot liquor, a full meal for less than a quarter. Number 16. The flour gravy stretch. 2 tablespoons of drippings, 2 tablespoons of flour, and a cup of milk or water. That gravy turned a 1/4 pound of meat into dinner for 10. Pan drippings from whatever was fried that night. Gold medal flour was whisked in until it turned the color of peanut butter for brown gravy, or left pale for sawmill gravy. Pet evaporated milk was added slowly while she stirred. Poured over rice, over biscuits, over cornbread, over the meat itself. A single pork chop, sliced thin and buried under gravy, fed 3 children who never knew there was not enough meat. The gravy was the trick. It multiplied what was already there. The children never knew they were poor. The gravy never told them. Number 15. Rice under everything. White rice was the foundation of nearly every meal. Whatever sat on top, the rice made it enough. Riceland or Mahatma long grain rice cost 10 cents a pound. A 25-pound sack lasted a family of 8 nearly a month. Cook it as 2 cups of water to 1 cup of rice, 1 tablespoon of bacon grease, and a pinch of salt, served under red beans on Monday, under smothered chicken on Wednesday, and under neck bone gravy on Saturday. A second helping of rice was always free. A second helping of meat was not. 6 tricks in. Not one of them required a specialty store or a grocery delivery. They worked with a chicken, a bag of beans, cornmeal, flour, rice, and the fat already in the pan. They did not need a meal kit delivered to the porch. They had a mother who taught them to see 3 meals where everyone else saw 1. Today, the average American family spends over $900 a month on groceries. Number 14. Jack mackerel croquettes. A can of jack mackerel, crushed saltine crackers, and 1 egg shaped into patties and fried. Protein for 6 people from a 12-cent can. Jack mackerel cost 12 to 15 cents a can in 1960. It was opened and dumped into a bowl, the bones mashed with a fork. The calcium was in the bones, and she knew that without being told. It was mixed with crushed saltine crackers, 1 beaten egg, black pepper, and a little minced onion. Shaped into flat patties, dredged in cornmeal, and fried in the iron skillet until golden on both sides. Served over white rice with hot sauce on the side. Number 13. The Commodity Box Transfund. USD. A surplus food arrived in plain cardboard, items like commodity cheese, powdered milk, canned meat, butter, and cornmeal. There were no recipes included. She turned those plain packages into meals people wanted to eat. 5 pounds of American commodity cheese came as one solid orange block. Powdered milk came in unmarked bags. Canned pork and canned beef arrived in plain silver tins with black stencil letters. The cheese melted into a roux of flour and butter and became macaroni and cheese that no Kraft box ever matched. She made the canned meat into hash with potatoes and onion. She made the powdered milk into banana pudding. She turned every nameless tin into something a family sat down for. Number 12. Pot liquor. The broth left after cooking greens was never poured down the drain. It was served in a cup, sopped with cornbread, or saved for tomorrow's soup. Collard greens or turnip greens simmered for hours with a ham hock or a smoked turkey neck. The liquid turned dark green, rich with iron and vitamins and pork fat. Poured into a coffee cup and served alongside the plate. Children drank it like broth. Some women saved it in a mason jar in the icebox and used it the next day to cook rice or start a new pot of soup. A bunch of collards cost 10 cents. The pot liquor cost nothing at all. Number 11. Bread pudding from stale bread. Day-old bread soaked in eggs, canned milk, sugar, and vanilla. Baked until golden. What should have been trash became the best thing on the table. Stale white bread from Colonial or Sunbeam. Heels and end pieces saved all week in a paper bag on top of the icebox. Torn into chunks in a baking dish, soaked in beaten eggs, pet evaporated milk, sugar, imitation vanilla, and a grating of nutmeg. Baked until set and golden on top. A simple sauce of butter, sugar, and a little canned milk poured warm over each serving. Total cost for a pan that fed 12 people was under 20 cents. She never called it frugal. She called it bread pudding. And every grandchild in that family has spent 30 years trying to make it taste the way hers did. Number 10. Neck bones all day on the back burner. Pork neck bones were the cheapest cut at the butcher counter. She braised them for hours until the meat fell apart in silky threads and the gravy turned thick as velvet. Pork neck bones cost 10 to 15 cents a pound. The butcher sometimes gave them away for free. She seasoned them with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and a shake of Lawry's seasoned salt. She browned them first in a skillet until dark on every side. Then she placed them in a heavy pot with just enough water to cover them. She cooked them on the back burner, on the lowest possible flame, for 4 to 5 hours. The cartilage melted. She served the meat over white rice, with the pot gravy ladled heavy on top. They cost a dime and tasted like something you would wait an hour in line for. Every one of these tricks has one ingredient in common, and it is not in the pantry. It is time. The beans cooked all day. The neck bones took 5 hours. The grease collected over weeks. These women gave the one thing they had the least of. They were raising children who were not always their own. They were cleaning other people's houses 6 days a week. And they came home and stood at that stove anyway. Number 9. Sweet potatoes from the yard. One sweet potato plant in the backyard produced enough for 6 different dishes. She grew them herself and never bought them once. Sweet potato slips were planted in spring and harvested by October. One hill produced 5 to 8 potatoes. They were baked whole, then split open and served with butter. They were mashed with canned milk and brown sugar. They were candied in a skillet with butter and sugar until glazed. They became sweet potato pie for Sunday. They turned into sweet potato bread. They were fried into chips for the children after school. No grocery cost, only labor and red clay soil. One hill, 6 dishes. She fed her family dessert from the dirt behind the house and never once thought that was remarkable. Number 8. Oxtails at 15 cents a pound. Oxtails were the butcher's last resort. Cheap, bony, ignored by everyone who could afford better. She braised them into something restaurants now charge $35 a plate for. Oxtails at 12 to 15 cents a pound in the 1950s and 60s. Today, they run $10 to $15 a pound. She seasoned them heavy, browned them in the skillet until dark on every flat surface, braised with onions, garlic, carrots, a bay leaf, a splash of Worcestershire. 4 to 5 hours on a low flame until the collagen dissolved and the meat slid clean off the bone. The gravy turned nearly gelatinous. Served over white rice, the bones picked clean by the time every plate was empty. The food nobody wanted became the food everybody remembers. Number 7. The backyard garden. Collards, tomatoes, green beans, okra, peppers, onions. She did not buy vegetables from a store. She grew them 3 feet from the kitchen door. A plot no bigger than a bedroom. Red clay turned with a shovel in March. Collard greens that grew waist-high and were picked leaf by leaf through the winter. Tomatoes staked with old broomsticks. Okra cut at dawn before the pods got tough. String beans snapped on the porch in a paper sack. Canning in mason jars every August. Shelves in the basement lined tight like a private grocery store that never closed. Her grocery bill for vegetables was $0. She never once called it organic or sustainable or farm to table. She called it the garden. Number 6. Chitlins cleaned for 6 hours. Chitlins. Chitterlings, hog intestines, they required hours of cleaning before they could be cooked. Other people discarded them, and she turned them into Christmas dinner. A 10-pound bucket of chitlins from the butcher, $1 to $2 in the 1960s. Cleaned under cold running water, turned inside out, every speck of membrane scraped away by hand. Some women cleaned them 5, 6, 7 times, until the water ran perfectly clear. Boiled with onion, vinegar, bay leaves, and red pepper flakes. Served with hot sauce and white bread, or alongside hog maw and collard greens. 6 hours of cleaning. That was the price of admission. She paid it every December without wondering if it was worth it. It was tradition. It was hers. Number 5. Sugar syrup desserts from almost nothing. Caramel cake from burned sugar. Tea cakes from lard and flour. Syrup sandwiches when there was nothing else left. Sweetness conjured from what other kitchens would call bare. Tea cakes made from flour, sugar, lard, or Crisco, eggs, and vanilla. Rolled flat and cut with a jelly jar lid. Baked pale and soft. Caramel cake iced with nothing but white sugar burned in a dry skillet until it turned amber, then milk added and stirred fast until smooth. Syrup sandwiches made with light bread and alaga, or Brer Rabbit cane syrup. Peach cobbler from canned peaches topped with a simple biscuit dough dropped by the spoonful. She burned sugar in a dry skillet and turned it into something no bakery in that city could match. That was not poverty. That was mastery. 20 people at a table is not just a head count. It is a statement. It means nobody in this family eats alone. These women did not cook for 20 because it was easy. They cooked for 20 because they decided the table was the one place where nobody would feel like they did not have enough. The food was the sermon. The table was the altar. Number 4. Cooking on Sunday for the whole week. Sunday was production day. After church, she cooked 4 or 5 dishes in bulk and portioned them out for every supper until the following Saturday. Sunday morning, after service, still in her good dress with an apron tied over the front, a roast or a hen in the oven, a pot of greens on the stove, rice in the biggest pot she owned. Cornbread made twice because one pan was never enough. Monday supper was leftover chicken with rice and gravy. Tuesday was the beans that started simmering Sunday night. Wednesday was the roast, sliced thin and reheated in its own juice. She worked 6 days a week in somebody else's house. On Sunday, she worked in her own. By sundown, her family was fed for 7 days. Number 3. Cornbread every single day. Cornbread was not a side dish, it was the daily bread. Made fresh every day in the same iron skillet, it turned any pot of beans or greens into a full meal. Self-rising cornmeal from Martha White, 10 cents a pound, mixed with buttermilk if she had it, an egg if she had one, a spoonful of bacon grease stirred in, poured into the cast iron skillet already smoking hot with grease, baked until the top was golden and the bottom crust turned dark and crisp from the iron. That skillet was never washed with soap, wiped clean with a rag. The next day's cornbread built on 40 years of seasoning beneath it. The cornbread was constant. The stove could be empty, the ice box nearly bare, but if there was meal in the tin and grease in the can, she could put something on that table. And she did, every single day. Number 2. The Church Plate Network. Women in the church cooked extra and sent plates to those who needed them. Nobody called it charity. A plate went out, a plate came back. That is how 20 families fed each other without a single one of them feeling less than. Aluminum foil pressed tight over a ceramic plate. A child sent walking 2 blocks with a plate still warm. A piece of chicken, rice, greens, a square of cornbread. Sister Johnson lost her husband, and a plate appeared on her porch every evening for 3 weeks. Nobody knocked. Nobody waited to be thanked. You saw the need. You filled the plate. That was all. The plate was never a handout. It was a conversation between women who understood that sometimes you give the plate and sometimes you receive it. That system fed more families than any program with a government seal ever did. Number 1. The hands that never measured. She never wrote a recipe down. She cooked by feel. A palmful of flour, a pour that lasted 2 seconds, a pinch that was never the same twice, and it always tasted right. How much salt, Grandma? Enough. The palm that cupped flour and already knew the weight of a half cup. The pour of buttermilk that stopped when the batter looked right, not when a line on a measuring cup said so. You just have to watch me do it. Then do it yourself. Then it is yours. 20 tricks. Not one of them needed a grocery delivery app, a food processor, or a recipe subscription box. They needed a pot, a flame, a garden, and the belief that a woman could feed her whole family on what other people threw away. And somewhere right now, a grandmother is standing at a stove, salting a pot without measuring, and a girl beside her is watching, not writing anything down, just watching. The lesson never needed words. It only needed the girl to stay. That kitchen kept the family alive. But the moment they stepped past the front door, a different kind of knowledge was required. Because the road between here and there was never the same road for everyone. A wrong turn or the wrong town after dark could undo everything the kitchen had built. Number 20. The chauffeur's cap on the front seat. Black men driving their own cars through the South kept a chauffeur's cap visible on the front seat. If stopped by police, they claimed they were delivering the car for a white employer. It was a gray twill driver's cap, the kind a servant would wear. A man's own car, paid for, title in the glove box. But a black driver in a well-kept automobile in Mississippi in 1953 was not seen as a man who worked hard. He was seen as a problem. One family was pulled over by an officer who demanded to know who owned the car. The father calmly explained it was his employer's. The woman was the maid. The children were hers. The officer asked, "Where is your hat?" The father pointed to the cap on the front seat. The officer let them go. It was a $2 cap from a 5 and dime. That was the difference between making it home and not. Some men kept 2 caps, one for summer and one for winter, rotating them by season so the story always looked fresh and believable. Number 19. Pack your own food. The shoebox lunch. Black families packed complete meals into shoeboxes, paper bags, and metal pails before every trip. They did not plan to stop at restaurants. They planned to never need one. Cold fried chicken, country ham sandwiches, pound cake, bologna on white bread, fried pork chops wrapped in wax paper, biscuits with fig preserve, a child's Buster brown box with the lid pressed down tight, the smell of pepper and grease and love sealed inside cardboard. One man remembered his mother spending the evening before every trip frying chicken and boiling eggs. Midnight in the kitchen, frying before dawn. The shoebox was not poverty, it was armor. A mother who could not protect her children from Jim Crow could make sure they were never hungry inside it. Some mothers packed extra portions for strangers they might meet along the road who had nothing. But the food was only half the problem. Even with a full shoebox, you still had to keep the car running, and that meant solving a problem most white travelers never thought about. Number 18. Never let the gas tank drop below half. Black drivers filled the tank before leaving and topped off at every safe opportunity. Many carried extra gasoline in the trunk. Running low was not an inconvenience. It was a crisis. Most stations along southern highways would not serve black motorists. Some would sell gas but lock the restroom. Others refused outright. Families carried containers of gasoline in their cars to avoid the humiliation entirely. A white family watched the needle drop and pulled into the next station. A black family watched the needle and felt the math change. Half a tank was not half full. It was the distance between safety and the last town that would sell to you. Some families kept a handwritten list of every friendly station between home and destination taped to the dashboard. Number 17. Carry your own restroom. Black families carried buckets, coffee cans, or portable containers in the trunks of their cars because they were routinely barred from restrooms at service stations. A Maxwell House coffee can with a lid. Toilet paper packed from home. The colored restrooms where they existed were often locked, broken, or deliberately left filthy. Families stuffed their trunks with blankets and pillows and even an old coffee can for those times when a bathroom was denied. A man could own a house, hold a job, pay taxes, serve his country, and on a Tuesday afternoon on US Route 40, he could not use a toilet. The coffee can solved the problem. It did not solve the insult. Mothers draped blankets between open car doors to give their daughters a small curtain of privacy on the roadside. The coffee can, the gas can, the shoebox. Survival tools, every one of them. But none of them mattered if you could not find a station that would serve you, and in mid-century America, there was almost exactly one company that would. Number 16. Only stop at Esso. Esso gas stations were virtually the only major chain that welcomed black motorists and employed black franchise owners. Families planned entire routes around them. The Standard Oil Company of New Jersey was the only major retail distributor of the Green Book through its network of Esso stations. In the early 1940s, Esso had more than 300 black franchise dealers. In the mid-1930s, Esso hired James A. Jackson, an African American, as a special representative to the black consumer market. Jackson and Victor Green devised a plan to distribute the travel guide in Esso stations across the country. A black family pulling into an Esso station in rural Virginia could fill the tank, use the restroom, and buy a green book off the counter. In a country with hundreds of gas station brands, there was one where a black man could fill his tank and keep his dignity. Children grew up recognizing the Esso oval sign the way other children recognized the golden arches years later. 5 rules in, and everyone is about something no white family ever had to think about. Food, fuel, a restroom, the right to be seen in your own car. These were not travel tips. They were field manuals for a country that built highways and then locked every door along the way. Number 15. Know every sundown town on your route. Black families memorized or were warned about sundown towns, municipalities that banned black people after dark. Driving through one after sunset could mean arrest, violence, or death. Historian James Loewen estimated there were as many as 10,000 such towns across the United States, not just the South. Illinois, Oregon, California, Connecticut. According to Loewen, the majority of counties along Route 66 excluded black residents, with dozens confirmed as sundown towns. Some posted signs at the city limits. Others did not need signs. The reputation traveled faster than any car. A black family that missed a turn and ended up in one after dark was not lost. They were trapped. Freedom had a curfew. The clock was the same color as the sky. Families traded updated lists of these towns at barbershops, beauty parlors, and church suppers every single year. Number 14. Time every arrival before dark. Black families planned departures and stops so they would reach each safe destination before sunset. Being on an unfamiliar road after dark was treated as a genuine emergency. Leave at 4 in the morning to arrive by 3 in the afternoon. No detours, no sightseeing. One black motorist described the building dread. In the morning, you felt free. By late afternoon, a shadow of apprehension fell on the heart. The sun was not just the end of the day. It was a deadline, and every black driver watched it move across the sky the way a sailor watches the weather. In winter, the shortened daylight meant leaving even earlier and driving faster to beat the falling dark. Number 13. Carry your own bedding. Blankets, pillows, and sometimes mattress pads were packed in the trunk. Not for camping. They were brought in case no hotel would take you. African Americans migrating to California in the early 1940s often found themselves camping by the roadside overnight for lack of any accommodation along the way. One mother recalled her thought after riding all day, "Wouldn't it be nice if we could spend the night in one of those hotels?" She watched white children jumping into motel swimming pools while her own children sweated in the back seat. The blanket was from her own bed. She brought it because the road had no bed for her. Some families carried the same quilt on every trip, and the children began to call it the traveling blanket. Number 12. Sleep in the car if you must. When no safe lodging could be found, families slept in their parked cars. Children curled under the quilt in the back seat. The father sat in the front, one eye half open. It was fairly common for black drivers to crash on Route 66. The NAACP told a local newspaper that the crashes were happening because sleep-deprived drivers could not find a place to rest. One woman remembered being a little girl when her father went to 3 or 4 different hotels and they turned him away. "My daughter is really ill and needs a bed to rest peacefully," he told them. They all said no. She remembered it was the first time she had ever seen her father cry. He did not sleep in the car because he could not afford a room. He slept there because 3 men at 3 front desks said the same thing. They learned to park under street lights near busy roads so passing cars would discourage anyone from approaching. Number 11. Keep the car in perfect condition. A breakdown was not a mechanical problem. It was a survival problem. Black families maintained their cars obsessively because being stranded in the wrong town could be fatal. They checked the oil, checked the tires, and carried a spare fan belt. Black drivers assembled what amounted to survival kits before driving any distance. They loaded their cars with food, water, maps, toilet paper, and extra gasoline. Everything needed to avoid asking anyone for help. A white family's breakdown was an inconvenience. A black family's breakdown was a reckoning with geography. The car was not transportation. It was the wall between your family and everything outside it. Fathers taught their sons basic engine repair at home so no roadside mechanic could ever hold power over them. Every one of these rules has one thing in common. They were designed to make a family invisible. Do not stop where you are not wanted. Do not be seen where you are not safe. Do not break down. Do not need anything from anyone. The American road trip was sold as spontaneity. For black families, spontaneity was the enemy. One man wrote that he did not believe white travelers had any idea of how much nerve and courage it required for a Negro to drive coast to coast in America. Number 10. Dress for respect, not comfort. Black families dressed in their Sunday best for road trips, not for vanity, for protection. Father in a pressed white shirt and tie, mother in a good dress and hat, children in church clothes. A well-dressed black family was slightly harder to dismiss, but black drivers were sometimes seen as uppity or too prosperous just for the act of driving, which many whites regarded as a white prerogative. He wore a tie to drive 800 miles, not because the road demanded it, because the road would use any excuse to stop him. The tie was not fashion, it was diplomacy at 60 miles an hour. Mothers ironed the children's clothes the night before and hung them on the back seat window hooks, ready at dawn. Number 9. Never ask a white stranger for directions. Black families carried their own road maps and studied the route before leaving. Stopping to ask directions could expose you to hostility or lead you into a sundown town. A Rand McNally atlas on the front seat. The route traced in pencil, every turn written on paper and clipped to the sun visor. They loaded up their cars with maps so they would not have to stop and ask for directions. A wrong turn was not embarrassing. It was dangerous. Self-reliance was not a philosophy. It was a survival tactic. You navigated by preparation because asking for help meant trusting someone who might not see you as human. Older drivers memorized entire routes by landmarks so they never had to slow down or roll a window down. Number 8. Teach the children what to say and what not to say. Before every trip, children were coached on what to do if the car was stopped. Sit still. Say nothing. Do not cry. Let Daddy talk. If a policeman stops us, you sit quiet and you do not move. Do not reach for anything. Do not open the door. Some mothers told the children it was a game. Some told them the truth. Most told them just enough to keep them still. These parents taught their children how to survive being stopped on the road in their own country. The lesson was not about manners. It was about coming home. Some children practiced the drill at the kitchen table before every trip until the stillness became second nature. Number 7. Call ahead to verify your welcome. Before departing, families telephoned ahead to hotel and tourist homes to confirm accommodations were still accepting black guests. Often it began with a long-distance call from the kitchen phone. We are a colored family of 4. Do you still have a room available Thursday? A listing in the Green Book might be a year old. Ownership changes and policies shift. A hotel that accepted black guests in January might not in August. She called to ask permission to sleep in her own country. The phone call was not a reservation. It was a negotiation with a nation that had not decided whether she was welcome. Some families made 5 or 6 calls before finding a single yes for one night on the road. But the telephone only worked if you had a number to call. In many places, there was no hotel, no motel, no listing at all. What there was in almost every town was a church. Number 6. Use the church and the lodge network. Black churches, fraternal lodges, sororities, and extended family networks functioned as an informal travel infrastructure. A letter sent weeks ahead to a pastor 3 states away, a member of Alpha Phi Alpha who could sleep on a chapter brother's floor, a grandmother who knew someone who knew someone. That contact became a bed for the night, a home-cooked meal, and a safe place to park the car. The church did not just save souls, it saved travelers. And the network it built was stronger than any highway because it was built on trust, not asphalt. Pastors sometimes drove ahead in their own cars to escort visiting families safely through the worst stretches of road. 14 rules deep, and a pattern has emerged. Every single rule was invented to replace something that should have been freely given. A restroom, a gas pump, a bed, a meal. These families did not lack resources. They lacked access, and what they built in its absence was held together by women packing shoeboxes at midnight, men checking tire pressure before dawn, postal carriers sharing addresses, and strangers leaving porch lights on. Number 5. Travel in pairs when you can. Families often traveled in convoy with another family. 2 cars were harder to harass. 2 fathers were harder to threaten than one. If one broke down, the other towed. If one was stopped, the other witnessed. This was not organized by any agency. It was arranged over Sunday dinner and at church after the service. People would say, "We are heading to Detroit Saturday. You want to caravan." There is strength in numbers. That is true in the wild, and it was true on U.S. Highway 61. The buddy system was not just for children on a field trip. It was how grown men kept each other alive on a public road in the richest country on earth. Sometimes 3 or 4 families joined the same convoy, stretching the caravan half a mile down the highway. Number 4. Carry proper papers at all times. Black drivers carried registration, title, license, and often a letter from an employer or a known white person verifying their identity and purpose. Keep the license in the breast pocket, not the back pocket. You did not want to reach behind you. One writer achieved coast-to-coast travel with nerve, courage, a great deal of luck, a rifle and a shotgun, a road atlas, and a copy of a travel guide. The documents were proof, not that you were innocent, that you belonged somewhere, that someone expected you, that your disappearance would be noticed. A free man in a free country carrying papers to prove he had permission to drive on a public road. Some men carried letters from 2 or 3 different employers, just in case one name was not enough. Number 3. The tourist home. Sleeping in a stranger's house. In towns with no hotel that would accept black guests, families slept in tourist homes, private residences where black homeowners rented rooms to travelers. The Green Book listed hundreds across the country. In 1954, it suggested visitors to tiny Roswell, New Mexico should stay at the home of Mrs. Mary Collins. A clean bed, a bathroom you could use, a glass of ice water. The women who ran tourist homes and the men who opened small motels formed the backbone of the African American tourist industry. She opened her door to strangers because the whole country had closed theirs. That front porch light was the most important light on the highway, and the women who left it on never got a monument. Some tourist homeowners stayed awake all night watching the road in case another family arrived after dark needing shelter. Number 2. The postal carriers who built the map. Compiled by Victor Hugo Green, a black postman who lived in the Harlem section of New York City. In 1936, he produced a 15-page guide that listed businesses in metropolitan New York that welcomed African-American customers. To compile it, Green drew on his own first-hand experience and recommendations from fellow postal workers who walked every street on their routes. They knew which businesses would serve black customers and which would not. Inspired by similar guides published for Jewish travelers, he expanded it year by year. Thanks to a partnership with Standard Oil, the Green Book was available at Esso stations nationwide. It eventually sold upward of 15,000 copies per year, and over its 3-decade run reached an estimated 2 million readers. A postal carrier built a survival guide for an entire people from a Harlem apartment. He used the same skills that delivered the mail. Walk the streets, know the territory, mark the safe houses. The government did not build it. A mailman did, because no one else would. Readers mailed corrections and new listings back to Green, turning the guide into a living document updated by thousands. Number 1. The promise on the first page. The introduction of the 1949 edition, Victor Green wrote a single paragraph containing the most quietly devastating sentence in American travel history. There will be a day sometime in the near future when this guide will not have to be published. That is when we as a race will have equal opportunities and privileges in the United States. Victor Green did not live to see that day. He died in 1960. The final edition was published in 1966, after the Civil Rights Act made the guide effectively obsolete. And a consequence of those advances was the closing of many black-owned businesses. Once black travelers could eat and sleep anywhere, the tourist homes and restaurants that had served them exclusively lost their customer base almost overnight. The tourist homes went dark, along with the postal carriers who walked the routes, the mothers who fried chicken at midnight, and the fathers who kept a chauffeur's cap on the seat. That world was held together by the hands of people who believed they deserved to travel in their own country, even when the country did not agree. Today, only a handful of original Green Book copies survive, held in archives and private collections, like whispered proof. 20 rules. Not one about the speed limit. Everyone was about something simpler: how to eat, where to sleep, how to fill a tank, and how to stay alive. And somewhere right now, a grandmother is sitting in a living room and a grandchild is asking why they never stopped on that drive. The answer will not fit in a textbook, but the child will remember the look on her face when she told it. The Green Book kept them safe on the highway. But the deepest protection never came from a printed page. It came from a grandmother who knew things no doctor would tell you and no pharmacy would sell you. That knowledge lived in her hands and her memory, and it never once appeared on a shelf with a price tag. Number 20. Cobwebs and soot on a bleeding cut. When a child came in bleeding from a deep cut, a grandmother would reach under the porch and pull a wad of spiderweb from the corner. She pressed it directly onto the wound. If the cut was deep, she packed it with soot scraped from the back of the wood stove. A strip torn from a bedsheet tied over the whole arrangement. No gauze, no adhesive bandage. By supper time, the bleeding had stopped. Spider webs have been found to contain compounds with antimicrobial properties. The ancient Greeks and Romans reportedly used them the same way, centuries before modern medicine had a name for antiseptics. Your grandmother did not know the word antiseptic. She knew the word hush, and it worked every single time. The next remedy did not come from the earth. It came from the drugstore. and the smell alone could clear a room. Number 19. The asafoetida bag. A small muslin pouch filled with the resin of the asafoetida plant hung on a string around a child's neck to ward off colds, flu, and disease. They called it devil's dung. The smell of rotten eggs and raw garlic packed into a sachet the size of a walnut, sewn shut by hand, hung around the child's neck on the first day of school and not removed until spring. No one sat close. No one coughed near them either. Lizzie Norfleet, who survived slavery, told a Federal Writers Project interviewer that every child wore an asafoetida bag around the neck to keep from catching diseases. In 1918, asafoetida was approved for use by the United States Pharmacopoeia during the Spanish flu pandemic. In 2009, researchers found that compounds from the roots showed potency against the H1N1 virus in laboratory tests. A grandmother who made her grandchild smell terrible to keep him alive was not being cruel. She was being precise. The next remedy worked by pulling something out of you. All it needed was a paper bag from the grocery store. Number 18. The brown paper bag soaked in vinegar. A piece of brown paper grocery bag soaked in apple cider vinegar, placed on the forehead to draw out a fever or stop a headache. Wrung out just enough so it would not drip down the temples. Placed across the forehead and held in place with a rag tied behind the head. You lay on the couch in the dark front room with the shades drawn. Grandmother watched from the kitchen doorway. No thermometer. She used the back of her hand. No diagnosis. She used her eyes. The paper bag cost nothing. The vinegar was already on the shelf. The fever broke before the doctor's office opened in the morning. When it was a baby screaming at midnight, that called for something softer. Something from the garden. Number 17. Catnip tea for a fussy baby. Dried catnip leaves were brewed into a weak tea, cooled, and spooned into a colicky infant's mouth to calm the stomach and help the baby sleep. The leaves were dropped into a cup of boiling water, steeped for 5 minutes, strained through cheesecloth, and cooled until barely warm. The baby quieted in 10 minutes and was asleep in 20. The house was finally still. A young mother at the end of her rope walked the floor at midnight with a screaming infant. Her mother arrived without being called. She brewed a cup, and the baby slept. That was not just tea. That was a woman who had raised 9 children and knew exactly what the crying meant. The next remedy went after pain in the jaw. The only tool it needed was a cotton ball. Number 16. Clove oil on a cotton ball for toothache. A few drops of clove oil pressed onto a cotton ball and held against an aching tooth. It numbed the pain in minutes. There was the sharp, warm burn of clove hitting the raw nerve, eyes watering, then the slow, spreading numbness, the pain pulling back like a tide. Dentists were expensive, and dentists who would see a black patient were scarce across most of the South. A cotton ball and clove oil held things together between visits that were sometimes years apart. Modern dentistry still uses eugenol in temporary fillings and root canal treatments. The grandmother charged nothing. She just said, "Hold still and press the cotton in." 5 remedies in, and notice what is missing. A receipt from a pharmacy. A waiting room. An appointment. These women built a complete medical system from a kitchen shelf and a garden row. Not because they wanted to, because the door to the doctor's office was closed, so the kitchen became the clinic. And the grandmother became the physician. She did not have a choice. She had children. The next remedy came from the pantry, a thick, dark syrup that tasted like iron and earth. Number 15. Blackstrap molasses for tired blood. A daily spoonful of blackstrap molasses, taken straight from the jar, to treat fatigue, anemia, and what grandmother called tired blood, thick as motor oil, nearly black. The deep, bittersweet taste of iron and earth. A tablespoon every morning before breakfast. Not sweet like table syrup. Dark, mineral, alive. Blackstrap molasses contains more iron, magnesium, copper, manganese, and calcium per tablespoon than almost any other edible source. A black woman in 1952 could not always get a doctor to see her. She could get a jar of blackstrap molasses for 30 cents. It held more iron than a serving of red meat. Because of the place molasses held in the rations of the enslaved, white society viewed it as fit only for the poor. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about a great many things. The next remedy went after a congested chest, and the only ingredient it needed was sitting in the vegetable bin. Number 14. The onion poultice on the chest. A whole yellow onion, roasted until soft, wrapped in a cloth, and laid hot on a congested chest to break up mucus and ease breathing. Roasted in the oven until translucent and steaming, split open and wrapped in a thin dish towel, then placed across the child's bare chest. The heat seeping through the cotton, the sulfur fumes rising into the sinuses, eyes burning, mucus loosening, the slow rasp of breathing turning into a clear, wet cough, the productive kind